Now that we've talked about doing the math the hard way, let me show you the easy way. We're going to use our financial calculator. So when we look at our financial calculator, we see that it's different than a standard calculator. For example, there's a row of buttons here, N, I, PV, PMT, and FV. These are the variables that we've used in the formulas that we've used so far. So the financial calculator is set up so you can do the math very simply. So to turn on our we turn on our calculator, we clear it in the lower left-hand corner, and then this register full of time value of money keys needs to be cleared as well. And although you might not be able to see it, if you hit the yellow button, which is the second on the second register, and then hit clear again, it clears the register. So any work that was previously saved, we can remove. So we always hit clear, and then we hit second and clear again to clear the whole calculator. It's very important you do this every time. I'm going to remind you about this a lot. Once we know what our variables are, we can simply punch them into the calculator and find our answer. But before we do, one of the things that's very important in using a calculator like this is to understand what the variables in your equation or in your calculation need to be. So we turn to our piece of paper and we draw our chart. In our previous example, we had a 10% interest rate over 7 years. We started at time period 0, and we started with a simple compounding problem of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and we simply wanted to find the future value of $100. Well, our calculator has these variables: N, I, PV, PMT, and FV. So if we look at our problem, what variables do we already know? Well, we know N is 7 because it's compounded annually. The number of periods is 7. We know that I is the interest rate per period, or 10%. We know that the present value is $100. We know the payment key, which we haven't discussed yet. The payment key is if you are adding money every period, or if you were discounting it, if you were paying off your balance every month or every period. So in this case, we're just putting $100 in and leaving it for 7 years, so there's no payment. And what we're looking for is the future value. We can do this easily in our financial calculator without using our formula, FV equals PV times 1.I raised to the T power. That's a little cumbersome. So let's just use our financial calculator. So we take our financial calculator, we clear, second, clear time value of money. The register is now cleared. We just need to enter our variables. So in this case, we know that the number of periods is 7. We hit 7N, and we see our calculator says N equals 7. So we know what's in the register. I is the second variable. We know it's 10%. Now the calculator is already thinking in percent terms, so you don't need to add 1.10 or 0.10. It's 10. The calculator thinks in percentages. So it's I equals 10. The present value is 100. 100 PV is the enter for the present value. Now payment should be 0 because we cleared the registers, but we don't ever trust that, so we hit 0 payment. And then to compute and find our future value, we simply hit the compute key, which is up here in the upper left-hand corner, compute future value. And we find it's $194.87. So 194.87 is the amount we will receive in the future if we deposit $100 today and it compounds annually at a 10% rate. Now this is the same answer we got with our math equation, but it was much easier. Now look how much easier it is to change the variables with the calculator. Remember, we cut our time periods in half in one of the previous examples, so we didn't have an N of 7, but we had an N of 14. And we also had to change the interest rate from annual, or 7 time periods, to 14 time periods, which provided a 5% return, or a 5% interest rate. So let's change that in the calculator. We clear the register, but we leave everything in the time value of money register here, or in the time value of money keys. So if we want to check that, we can hit right above clear as recall. We hit recall, N is 7. We know that that should be 14. So we do 14N. And then the interest rate we know is 10 in the calculator, but it doesn't need to be 10. It needs to be 5. So we do 5I. And then if we want to check it, we can recall present value is 100, recall payment is 0, and then simply compute future value. And we end up with 197.99. And if you recall from the previous example, that was exactly the answer we got when we used the formula and we just added the ends into it, the different time periods. So in changing the number of time periods and adjusting for the interest rate change per time period, we find that we can very quickly use a financial calculator to find our answers as opposed to redoing math.